So, as a house music artist, some of us wonder if Traxsource or Beatport charts really make a difference. If do they have an impact on sales, or does it help raise our profile? And over the years of releasing music, I've made a few observations about this, and I wanted to share this and start a conversation about it. But really, the answer to the question of whether Traxsource or Beatport charts really matter is really it depends. It depends on the type of chart, and then also what your goals are and what you're looking to get out of charts. So there are four main categories of charts that we'll discuss, and that is, first category is retailer sales charts. So that would be things like Beatport Top 100, Traxsource Top 100, things like that. And then there's the retailer A&R curated charts, which are things like the hype charts on Beatport or the weekend weapons and essentials charts on Traxsource. And then there are the DJ charts. There's the two categories of DJ charts. That would be the DJ charts that DJs create. And then I'll say that another category is the DJ charts where your track appears on their chart. And as we cover these categories and discuss them further, keep in mind your goals for what you want to get out of a chart. Are you trying to get noticed by labels or other artists? Are you trying to just support your community? Are you looking for higher status on the year-end charts? With the number of people that are charting you. Are you using charts to promote your music and hopefully drive sales? And then are you using Traxsource charts as kind of just a small component of your content strategy? Let's discuss. All right, so first category is retailer sales charts. Again, this is things like weekend weapons. No, I'm sorry. It's things like the top 100 of each genre or the top 100 overall page, things like that. I'll say that the sales charts are probably the most straightforward charts because they're based on sales data, with a few caveats that these charts can't, the placements can be bought in a way, because you'll hear of artists sometimes, purchasing 50 copies of their own track just so that they can make it onto the top 100, with the mentality maybe being that if your track makes it into the top 100, people will see that, will be more likely to see your track and then actually buy your track and get real sales based on your fake sales. I don't know if that's really a strategy that works, but it is something to keep in mind when you're looking at your position on these charts. One thing to note also is that positions are relative to the sales of other tracks for that given time period. So that's something why that's important to consider is that your track that's sitting at number 30 on the top 100 of the Deep House chart, for example, that the same number of sales might actually mean a different chart placement in a different time period. It's really just about how many, what other tracks are being released compared to yours, and what your track is like compared to the others that are released for that chart period. And as we know, retail sales are often unpredictable. A lot of times we can't necessarily guarantee that a track that we that we release will be successful. If we were able to do that, we'd all be having successful tracks every single time. There have been tracks I've released that I thought were going to do well that ended up not doing all that well. But then there are tracks that I didn't think were going to be all that good that ended up kind of placing really high on the charts. So it's really hard to predict that. A lot of times sales are dependent on the time that your track is released. So if your track is released during Miami Music Week or ADE or something like that, you might have a harder time selling tracks because a lot of labels are releasing tracks around the same time, and a lot of compilations are being purchased by people. And so that's just something to consider as well. And then another thing to note is that the genre-specific sales charts for a lot of these subgenres on the Traxsource website is that they don't take very many sales to reach the top 100 for that genre's that genre's sales chart. Last I heard, it only takes like, I don't know, 10 sales to make it into the top 10 on the garage chart and on Traxsource. You can make it into the top 10 of the Jacket House chart by selling like 7 copies. And granted, it's going to be different every week, but generally, there's not that many sales required to actually make it into the top 100. So that's something to consider as well. At the end of the day, having tracks on sales charts are helpful, and they do help to drive sales because success breeds success. And when when your track is among others that are successful, it will be more likely to be heard by other people, which will lead to sales. All right, the next topic is the retailer A&R curated charts. So this is things like the weekend weapons, the hype charts, and the essentials charts, etc. Weekend weapons is often one of the biggest drivers of sales for Traxsource buyers or Traxsource tracks. And I don't know if it's because there's just so much good music that's being released that there's in order to maybe help with our buying decisions, we trust that the weekend weapons are going to be pretty good tracks because they've already got a stamp of approval from the Traxsource A&R team, and so maybe that's a reason why weekend weapons are so successful. And then I'll say that it doesn't really hurt that these charts or these tracks are being on these charts, because you can include in your promo that the track has been on weekend weapons. Now, I've actually moved away from posting on social media about my track being on the weekend weapons. I'll maybe say something in passing about my track being on the weekend weapons. So if I'm posting some other content, I'll say kind of at the end of the content or somewhere in the middle of it, I'll kind of slip in that it's supported by weekend weapons. But I don't necessarily make a post exclusively to say, hey, my track is on weekend weapons, because I don't know, I feel like there's not a ton of value out there, and I've tried to pivot my content more towards actual audio of the track so that people can hear the track. And I think that maybe sometimes people will see that message like, my track is number 33 on Weekend Weapons or whatever it is. And maybe they will buy it by that, and maybe buy it because of that. And maybe it's just a reminder of them for someone to, oh yeah, I was going to buy that track. So I'm not saying it's a terrible thing to post about that, but I feel like there's other ways to promote your track other than saying the chart placement as like the exclusive content piece for that post. It's also important to keep in mind that while these charts do help to drive sales, there really isn't a whole lot that we can do about it. I mean, maybe Traxsource will be more likely to chart our tracks on the weekend weapons and hype charts if they see that we're charting pretty regularly or creating our own charts pretty regularly, but really, it's the relationship that they have with the labels that makes, I think, a bigger impact on whether the A&R team is going to chart your track for that week. It's also important to know that, the A&R charts are only one opinion. And yes, Traxsource and Beatport, they do have a huge influence in our scene, but they are only one opinion, and there are other ways of getting the message out about our tracks other than being on charts. As artists, we need to take control over our own artistry and our own careers as artists, and relying on Traxsource A&R or Beatport A&R isn't necessarily sustainable long term. Instead, we got to focus on building our own platforms as much as we can, creating YouTube content, creating Instagram content, creating a community around our artistry so that our community will just show up for us and buy the tracks no matter what, whether they're charted or not. We're getting into the topic of DJ charts, and I'll start with the DJ charts that you create as an artist. From what I can tell, charts that I create, where I include my own track, doesn't necessarily influence sales of those tracks very much. I don't have a ton of data on this, but when I have gotten data from labels, very few sales seem to come from my DJ charts that I publish, if at all. A few years ago, I conducted a little experiment where I was doing a chart once a week, and I would chart about 15 different tracks every week, and they were essentially a playlist of what I was going to have on my mix series, Refuel Your Soul. Since I was already curating these tracks and purchasing them, it didn't really take that much effort, more effort to convert those playlists into Traxsource charts. Traxsource makes it pretty easy to do that. I didn't really see a difference in sales of my tracks, but so when I stopped doing mixes regularly, it didn't make sense for me to keep publishing DJ charts at the time. That's where my mind was at. I've noticed that charts that I create are not super helpful for driving sales. However, Andy Reid, he's the label boss over at Phoenix Music. He and I had a lengthy conversation about this when I interviewed him for my podcast. And he said that he does take notice of when artists are charting tracks on the Phoenix labels. So it might help with your name recognition to be charting tracks. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I'm sure that other labels notice as well. And it could be helpful to help with name recognition for the labels that whose tracks you're charting. All right, fourth category is the DJs who chart your tracks. When a DJ charts our tracks, does it really help drive sales? And I feel like that depends on the influence and the name recognition of the artist. And for example, if Miguel Miggs, charts your tracks, your track in his chart, that may actually, that probably has a lot more influence than if I were to chart your track. I don't think anybody's really looking at my charts that much and buying music based off of those charts. But even if the people aren't buying tracks from those bigger named artists, it does help to I don't know, you can say that your track is being supported by Miguel Miggs or At Jazz or Mo Cream or whoever it is. I think that is valuable in its own right. Okay, I'm going to talk about a little bit about something that's a little bit controversial, and that is what I'm calling chart chasers. I have kind of some mixed feelings about this. And what I mean by the chart chaser is that you can see somebody charting 50 tracks in the same week, and it's every week. And so if you take 50 times, let's say that there's about 4 weeks in the month, that's 200 tracks a month that they're charting, and it doesn't feel like to me there's actual support there when they're probably not playing all of 50 tracks in their mixes or their shows for that week or that month. And they're certainly not playing 200 tracks per month. 200 tracks, that's too much to keep up with. And I feel like the reason people are doing that is because they're focusing more on getting noticed than they are on showing authentic support. And maybe I could be wrong, but I don't know. It just doesn't feel like 50 tracks a week of charting 50 tracks a week is all that supportive to me. I know that there are some exceptions where there are people who are supporting or who are charting 40 tracks a week, but they are including them in their mixes. And I know that they're doing a 2 to 3 hour mix every week, and most of that is new music. And so I know that there are exceptions to that. And then there's also this phenomenon of what people sometimes call chart pods. It's where you join a group of people and you all agree to support each other's tracks. And I don't know, I feel like maybe that works to a degree, but it feels really hollow to me. I don't feel like it is authentic, and I feel like people can smell the inauthenticity in that. And so I don't know that that's really a good approach. And maybe it works for somebody who's doing that, but personally, that's not an approach that I would take because, again, it doesn't feel authentic. There's nothing wrong with expecting reciprocity. And sometimes I do chart tracks because I want to support the person, because they have supported me and I want to do something for them. But really, I want to support their track by buying it and then putting it in my mix. And that's, I feel like, the better way to support the artist. And and chart them too. But if I like just chart their track and I don't actually buy their music, then I don't know. I don't really think that that's very supportive. One thing that I've noticed is that some of the tracks that I've released that have had a lot of chart support haven't necessarily always been the biggest selling tracks. And the tracks that I've released that haven't had the most charts, haven't had very many charts haven't been placed on very many charts, they've sold a lot. So I don't see any correlation really between the number of DJ charts that my track appears on and the number of sales that drives. I mentioned that I talked to some label owners about this, and I'm going to share a quote from Martin Deb. I asked him to send me his thoughts on this topic, and he says, "Much depends on the popularity and reach of the artist who publishes the Traxsource charts. Charts published by big names are certainly more likely to be checked out of curiosity than those by producers with less name recognition and a much smaller fan base. Traxsource encourages producers to publish them, but I feel that the weekend weapons, especially those in the top 50 and then the essentials charts or the hype chart, are more effective in boosting sales." So that's actually really in alignment with what I've observed as well. He also says, "Anyone willing to dig deeper for gems makes checking these lists a priority. Personally, I treat the weekly summaries a bit like a notebook of what I'm going to buy and play in my mixes in the future." And I will say that Martin Deb is one of those guys who does chart 40 tracks a week, but he plays 40 tracks a week in his mixes, in his various mixes. All right, another quote from Liam Connolly. He manages Delve Deeper Records, and he says, he sent me a voice message that I couldn't necessarily I didn't catch everything that he said, but one quote that I was able to extract from that was, he says, "If your track isn't making it to the essentials or weekend weapons, it's dead in the water." So here are my final thoughts on the charts. Our success as an artist is not dependent on charts, much less any one single chart. No single chart placement will propel our careers to the next level, but a chart can help push it forward just a little bit in an incremental manner. But our longevity as artists depends on having an ecosystem of really good music releases, regular content that engages our audience, and it depends on the experiences that we create for our community and the direct relationships that we cultivate. So charts can be one piece of our content strategy. They don't really take that long to create, and we can use them to support our community and maybe get noticed by some labels and other artists. But I think it's important, like I mentioned earlier, to be authentic about the support that we're giving. So if people are paying attention to your charts, don't you want to reflect the music that you're actually buying and your current taste in music? And like I mentioned, it's important to be authentic about our chart selections because they are in a way making a statement about our taste in music. I mentioned earlier that Andy Reid and I discussed this topic at length when I interviewed him for my podcast. You can check out the full interview where we talk about this and so many other amazing topics. We talk about music business, and you can click the link above to see that full episode. And I'd also love to hear what you think. Do you think that charts make a difference? Leave a comment below to share your thoughts.